Hey, so last week in the first episode in this series, I talked about something I don't think enough women fully realize happens after hysterectomies. Not the surgery itself, but the fact that women lost one of their body's clearest communication systems before they ever entered into menopause when they have a hysterectomy. So the visible warning signs, if you will, the changing cycles, the progression of those cycles slowing down or intermittently happening, the clues. Once those signals all disappeared, a lot of women entered that menopausal transition without fully understanding what was happening to them physically. And I'm one of those women. But the more I've kind of sat with this conversation and had it in my own head over the last several years, the more I've realized this is a much larger conversation. It became much bigger than just hysterectomy, and it became much bigger than women who had hysterectomies and women who didn't have hysterectomies. Because the more I've worked with the women, whether they had hysterectomies or not, the more I've noticed something deeper happening emotionally and psychologically during this phase of life. So a lot of women, me included again, stopped feeling comfortable, or maybe more, I should say more, they stopped feeling familiar to themselves. And I don't think we talk about that part enough or at all. Because yes, there are definite there are definite physical changes in midlife. But I think for many, many women, there's a struggle that can almost be deeper than the physical. And the struggle is what happens psychologically when the body that used to feel predictable does not anymore. So when things that used to work stop working, when your energy changes, when your sleep changes, when you look in the mirror and you don't recognize yourself, so your body composition changes. I know this is true for me too. And I talk to a lot of women who tell me, well, at one time I weighed 100 and X pounds, whatever that number is. And now I weigh that same thing, but my body looks different. It feels different. It's softer. It's squishier. It doesn't have as much firmness to it, tone to it, whatever. So your body composition changes. Your ability to manage and tolerate stress and emotions all feel different, and our confidence feels different, and maybe from the outside you still look fine, and we're probably telling people we are fine, right? You're still functioning, showing up and handling all the things, the responsibilities, and taking care of everyone and going to work and being dependable, but internally something just feels off. And because so many women didn't fully understand what was happening psychologically during this transition, they often interpreted that feeling as failure, a personal failure, rather than a transition. It became somehow a failure, right? I know I thought so many times, like, I need to get it together. I need to be more disciplined. I need to stop eating such crap all the time. I need to get on track. And I just need to tighten things up. I know what to do. I need to tighten things up. And I understand why women feel that way. Because for so many of us, discipline worked before. We are the women who spent decades figuring things out, pushing through, managing hard stuff, handling all the responsibilities of taking care of everyone, handling all the pressure, and doing all of that while we're still functioning ourselves, right? So when our body becomes less predictable, our instinct was not to be easy on ourselves, not to be kind to ourselves. Our instinct was control, right? Put in place routine and structure, put in place more food restriction and tracking, dieting, self correcting, and all the pressure that goes with all of that. And I mean, I get it because as humans, when we feel uncertain, when we feel out of control, we naturally want to regain stability somehow. And I think for a lot of women like us, getting stricter with food became an attempt to restore not just our bodies, but our sense of self. I don't think many women were just trying to lose weight. I think a lot of us were trying to feel like we recognize ourselves again. We were trying to stabilize what was happening and make it more predictable and feel more capable around it and attractive again and energetic and emotionally steady and comfortable in our own skin. I have heard that desire from women for years. I just want to be comfortable in my own skin again. And I can so relate to that. We just want to try to feel like ourselves again. And that conversation is a much more complex, deeper conversation than about diets and about the diet culture. Because when your body feels foreign to you, when it feels unfamiliar, that can affect your relationship with yourself. And it does it in this like quiet kind of way. And I think that's where so many women become really exhausted. And I know I don't just mean like exhausted like physically, like the kind of exhausted you feel when you come home from work. Sure, that too, but I think this is where so many women feel emotionally exhausted, not just the physical part of being tired, but the emotional exhaustion from constantly trying to manage, to monitor, to fix, and to correct themselves. And the really heartbreaking part of this to me is that so many women interpret this struggle as proof that somehow we're failing. Like we've become weak, or this means that we've lost our discipline and now we're unmotivated. And maybe even some women say they're lazy or think of themselves as lazy. Meanwhile, here's the irony in all of this. Meanwhile, it's during a time when you're trying harder than ever. I talk to women every day who tell me like I am putting in the work. I'm trying harder to lose this weight than I've ever tried to lose weight in my life. I have been tracking calories, cutting calories, tracking macros. I've been reading everything I can get my hands on about exercise and nutrition, and I know how to eat healthy. I've been putting in the work and I'm just not getting any results. And again, I think that's the irony is we feel undisciplined, unmotivated, like we've lacked, somehow we've lost our willpower during a time when we've tried harder than ever before. And for a lot of women in midlife, this disconnect is not about willpower. It's not about not caring or just letting yourself go or settling for feeling fat and frumpy, which is those are the two F words I hear most associated with how women feel. Fat and frumpy. I just feel like I hit 50 and I got fat and frumpy. And it's not that. A lot of women are struggling because they care really deeply. And so they're overthinking all of this constantly. They're obsessively monitoring and trying to do the right thing again and again, starting over constantly, trying to regain control of their body and what feels like life constantly. And this is part of why so many women develop such like emotionally complicated relationships with food and exercise and with your body during midlife, because every change, every physical change that we started feeling during this time gets loaded with meaning, right? The weight didn't just feel like weight gain this time. It felt like a loss of confidence, a loss of control, maybe even a loss of like you can't trust yourself. So there's like this sense of self trust that's lost. Certainly the familiarity is lost, like I said before. And so there's like this loss of who am I? This loss of identity. And now remember, too, this is all happening at a time in life where a lot of things are changing about who we are. Maybe our kids are leaving the house, and so the role of mother is changing. Maybe because the kids are leaving, our relationship with our partner is changing because we've been focused on the kids for so long. And so lots of changes in who we are contribute to this physical change. And that all can make us feel like we've lost our sense of self, we've lost who we are as a woman. And especially for women who had hysterectomies earlier and who lost those visible hormonal warning signs that I talked about in episode 1, that confusion may be even more amplified during this time of life because there was never a clear moment for us where we could recognize, oh, my body's like entering this new phase now. I don't have cycles anymore. So maybe this is perimenopause. Especially for women like us, I said this confusion comes in, but even for women who had cycles, they often misunderstood what was happening too, right? So it doesn't matter if you've had a hysterectomy or not. Most of us never were taught how expansive and wholly encompassing this transition can be. It's not just physical, it is a psychological transition too. And I think that misunderstanding shaped the emotional experience of midlife for a lot of women, far more than people realize, even though I know it's getting a lot more attention on social media. Midlife, and menopause is getting a lot more attention, and there's a lot more conversation than there were, in years past. But I still think that there's a lot of misunderstanding around the emotional and psychological side of this experience, this transition. The weight is getting more attention and some of the other kinds of symptoms that we experience, but the psychological confusion and misunderstanding, the emotional confusion and misunderstanding is an experience that we so many people don't realize how all encompassing it can be. And when a woman feels unfamiliar to herself, she often blames herself instead of evaluating or re-evaluating the framework they're using to understand what's actually happening. And so I think women try for a lot of years, they try to force themselves back into this older version of themselves instead of realizing that we're actually navigating a completely new and different phase of life that requires a very different relationship with our bodies altogether. And this phase is not about punishment and panic. It can't be about constant self correction. It has to be about understanding. And when we look at it through that lens, when we kind of frame it in that way, it opens a huge, different, wider, deeper conversation. Because if so many women entered this space feeling confused and blindsided and disconnected from themselves and completely unprepared for what this transition can be and feel like, where did the disconnect happen in the first place? That's one of the questions that it brings up, and a conversation I think that needs to be had. And why were we taught so little about this phase of life? Why do we think of menopause, or at least we used to think of menopause as just hot flashes? That's what I thought. I thought going through menopause meant a bunch of hot flashes and not having a period anymore. Well, I already didn't have my period anymore because I had a hysterectomy. So I looked at it and thought hot flashes. And I want to be honest too, because I was so judgmental. I remember kind of there being some talk or references in movies or something to hot flash. And I thought that's such a bunch of, like, how do you just get all of a sudden hot? Anyway, I digress. But this larger conversation is really warranted. I mean, things like, okay, why were women entering one of the biggest physiological and psychological transitions of life with basically no way to understand it? No one giving us a roadmap, no one giving us a framework, not in any kind of meaningful way to understand this transition that can last years. Those are some of the larger conversations I think are worth happening. Like, why? Where did this begin? How did we get to this place? And I think that's where I want to go in the next episode, which will be the final episode in this three-part series. I want to talk about this transition that no one prepared us for. So that's enough for today. I kind of droned on for a lot longer than I thought I would. But part three, tune in for I sound like a commercial for television, right? Tune in for part three. But next week I want to move to that part, that part of the conversation. Why did we get here? How did we get here? And how did we enter this? Like a third of our life is spent in this period. How did we get here without any context for understanding it? That's where I'll go next time. So thanks for being here with me for part two in this three-part series. Thanks for being here every week. I so enjoy these conversations with you, and I'll meet you right back here next time.